What happens when you have to choose between everything the world wants for you and the one thing your heart knows is true? In a Lagos mansion where wealth meant power and marriage meant strategy, a young woman faced an impossible decision. Two men had asked for her hand. One could give her the world, private jets, diamonds, a life of luxury beyond imagination. The other had nothing. No money. No status. Just a kind heart and a dream. Her father had already chosen for her. Society expected her to be smart. But her heart whispered something dangerous. This isn't just a story about love. It's a story about what you're willing to lose, to find what truly matters. Before the discernment, the struggle, and the shock, there was Grace. A billionaire's daughter about to make a choice no one saw coming. Before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. Now, lean in. Because this is the story of the woman who chose the broke man over the billionaire, and shocked everyone with what happened next. The evening sun dipped low over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. In the sprawling estate of the Williams family, Grace stood on the balcony of her father's mansion, watching the gates below. Her father, Chief Samuel Williams, was one of the wealthiest men in West Africa. Oil, real estate, banks. His name carried weight across 3 continents. But tonight, Grace felt the weight of something else entirely. A choice. A choice that would define the rest of her life. 2 men had asked for her hand in marriage. The first was David Okonkwo, a billionaire in his own right. 35 years old, handsome, Harvard-educated, and dripping in success. He arrived at their home in convoys. He spoke about mergers and acquisitions over dinner. He promised Grace a life of luxury beyond imagination. Private jets. Villas in Paris. Diamonds that could buy small nations. Chief Williams adored him. He saw David as the perfect match. A union that would elevate their family's legacy even further. Grace's mother, too, was enchanted. She spent hours describing the wedding that would be featured in magazines across the world. But then there was Michael. Michael Adeyemi. A school teacher. 28 years old, with kind eyes and a laugh that sounded like home. He had no car. He lived in a modest 2-room apartment in Suralea. He rode the bus to work every morning, where he taught mathematics to children who couldn't afford private schools. He wore the same 3 shirts on rotation, each one ironed with care. When he visited the Williams estate, the security guard smirked. The housekeepers whispered. Chief Williams barely looked at him. But Grace saw something no one else did. She saw a man who asked about her dreams, not her father's wealth. A man who brought her wildflowers instead of designer bags. A man who listened when she spoke, really listened, as if her words were treasures. Her father's voice boomed from the living room below. Grace. Come down here. David is waiting. She closed her eyes and took a breath. In her heart, she had already made her decision. But she knew the storm that was coming. She knew her father would rage. Her mother would cry. Society would mock her. But something whispered deep in her soul, something ancient and true. Love is not measured in bank accounts. Character cannot be bought. And the richest man in the world is poor if he has no heart. Grace descended the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a drumbeat in her chest. David stood in the center of the room, a velvet box in his hand. Chief Williams smiled broadly, already imagining the headlines. But Grace walked past David, past her father's expectant gaze, and out the front door. Michael was standing by the gate, waiting as he always did, humble and patient. She took his hand. And in that moment, the whole world held its breath. The next morning, Chief Williams disowned her. Not with silence, but with fury. You have shamed this family, he roared, his face red with rage. You chose a nobody over a king. You will regret this for the rest of your miserable life. Grace packed a single bag. Her mother wept at the doorway but did not stop her. Grace moved into Michael's small apartment, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbors arguing at night. She cooked on a single burner. She washed clothes by hand. She who had grown up with maids and drivers now learned the weight of a water bucket. But strangely, she felt lighter than she had in years. Michael worked long hours, but he came home every evening with stories that made her laugh. He told her about Samuel, the boy who finally understood fractions. About Blessing, the girl who wanted to be a doctor. About the dreams he planted in young minds every single day. Grace began volunteering at his school, teaching English to the younger children. She discovered a purpose she never knew existed. For the first time in her life, she felt useful. Not ornamental. Not a trophy. But alive. But the test was only beginning. Weeks turned into months. Grace's old friends stopped calling. At the market, women who once greeted her warmly now whispered and pointed. That's Chief William's daughter, they said. The fool who threw away a fortune. David Okonkwo, scorned and embarrassed, used his influence to make Michael's life difficult. The school where Michael taught suddenly faced funding cuts. Salaries were delayed. Michael took on weekend tutoring jobs, walking miles to save bus fare. Grace saw the exhaustion in his eyes, and doubt crept into her heart like a thief. Had she been selfish? Had she destroyed his life along with her own? One night, Michael came home soaked from the rain. He had walked for 2 hours because he'd given his last money to a student who needed textbooks. Grace broke down in tears. I've ruined you, she whispered. You would be fine if you never met me. Michael knelt before her, taking her hands gently. Grace, before I met you, I was alive. But I wasn't living. You didn't ruin me. You completed me. We are not rich in money, but look around. We are rich in love. We are rich in purpose. And that, my love, is a wealth that can never be taken away. But the universe wasn't finished testing them yet. 3 months later, Grace discovered she was pregnant. Joy mixed with terror. How would they afford a child? Their landlord had already threatened eviction for late rent. Michael worked himself to exhaustion, taking every tutoring job he could find. Grace sewed clothes for neighbors, her fingers blistered and raw. And in the quiet moments, when fear whispered loudest, they held each other and chose hope over despair. But neither of them knew that in the shadows, something was shifting. A storm was gathering, but so was a miracle. Chief Samuel Williams was dying. Liver disease, the doctor said. Too many years of rich food and richer wine. He lay in his mansion, surrounded by luxury but drowning in regret. His wife sat by his bedside, her face hollow with grief. David Okonkwo visited once, stayed 10 minutes, and never returned. The business partners came with contracts, not comfort. The mansion felt like a tomb. And in the suffocating silence, Chief Williams realized the truth. He was surrounded by people, but he was utterly alone. He asked for Grace. His wife hesitated, but she made the call. Grace stood in that small apartment, her hand on her swollen belly, and stared at the phone. Michael touched her shoulder. It's your choice, he said gently. I'll support whatever you decide. Grace closed her eyes, and she thought about bitterness. About pride. About how easy it would be to let her father die alone, the way he'd left her to struggle. But then she thought about the children at Michael's school. About second chances. About the kind of mother she wanted to be. And she knew what she had to do. Grace and Michael arrived at the estate the next evening. The guards barely recognized her. She had lost weight. Her clothes were simple, mended in places. But there was something different about her eyes. A strength that hadn't been there before. Chief Williams wept when he saw her. Not the angry tears of a proud man, but the broken tears of a father who had lost his way. "Forgive me," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I was so blind. I thought wealth was everything. I thought David's money would make you happy. But I see now. I see what matters." Grace held her father's hand, and forgiveness flowed like water on parched ground. In the weeks that followed, Chief Williams got to know Michael. Really know him. They talked for hours about education, about purpose, about the things that make a life meaningful. The old man, who had spent decades building an empire, realized he had built nothing of true value. His legacy was money, and money turns to dust. But Michael's legacy was in the hearts of children. In minds opened. In futures changed. That, Chief Williams understood too late, was true wealth. Before Chief Williams passed, he made things right. He established a foundation in Grace and Michael's name, dedicated to funding schools in underserved communities. He left them enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be corrupted. "Wealth without character is a curse," he told Grace on his final day. "But character with purpose, that's a blessing that echoes through generations." He died peacefully, his hand in his daughter's, finally understanding what it meant to be rich. 5 years later, Grace and Michael stood in the ribbon-cutting ceremony of their 100th school. Their daughter, Hope, played nearby, her laughter like music. Grace looked at Michael, his hair starting to gray at the temples, and she smiled. They had never become billionaires. They drove a modest car. They lived in a simple home. But they had changed thousands of lives. They had built something that would outlive them. And in the quiet moments, when the world was still, Grace knew with absolute certainty. She had chosen correctly. Not because of what happened after, but because she had chosen with her heart. And a heart that chooses love over luxury, character over cash, purpose over prestige, will never, ever lead you wrong. The sun set over the schoolyard, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. And Grace, once a girl who had everything but nothing that mattered, now had everything that did. Grace never became a billionaire. She never lived in mansions or wore priceless diamonds. But 5 years later, she stood at the opening of their 100th school, her daughter playing nearby, Michael beside her, and she knew she had chosen correctly. Not because of what came after, but because she chose with her heart. Her father learned too late that wealth without character is a curse. But Grace learned early that a life built on love, purpose, and truth is the only wealth that lasts. Now it's your turn. If this story moved you, hit like, share it, and tell me in the comments. What would you choose, wealth without love, or love without wealth? Subscribe to Stories by the King, where every story carries a heartbeat, and every choice carries a lesson. This is Stories by the King, where love wins, and purpose finds its home.